Did Christie Brimberry just destroy her own career by revealing which Fast and Loud cast members she absolutely despised? For years, fans believed the Gas Monkey Garage crew was one big happy family, working together to build incredible cars and create TV magic. But that wholesome image just got completely shattered. Christie Brimberry, the backbone of Gas Monkey Garage and the person who knew every secret behind those garage doors, has finally broken her silence about the co-stars she couldn't stand. She's naming names, exposing toxic behavior, and revealing shocking details about what really went down when the cameras stopped rolling. The truth is so explosive that it's already sending shockwaves through the automotive community, and some former cast members are scrambling to do damage control. So in this video, I'm going to break down everything Christie revealed, the specific cast members she called out, and why her bombshell confession is changing everything we thought we knew about Fast and Loud forever. What happens when you put a hyperactive tornado inside a $1 million workshop and expect it to behave? Christie Brimberry found out the hard way every single day. Tom Smith wasn't just another mechanic at Gas Monkey Garage. He was a walking disaster that Christie had to contain like a dangerous chemical reaction. But here's where it gets interesting. While everyone else saw Tom as the funny, energetic guy from TV, Christie saw the truth behind the cameras. Her main job, as she once admitted, was literally just dealing with Tom Smith. Think about that for a second. In a garage filled with expensive builds and tight deadlines, her biggest responsibility was babysitting a grown man who couldn't control his volume or his impulses. Christie came from a world of serious business. Her father ran an old-style meat market his whole life, teaching her what real work ethic looked like. She raised 6 children and knew how to manage chaos. But Tom treated Gas Monkey like his personal playground. He was so loud and hyperactive that Christie constantly had to remind him he was indoors and needed to quiet down or just leave the room entirely. She even joked that in a fight between Tom and an elderly ape, Tom would win because he just talked so much the ape would run away. It sounds funny, but it points to the real problem. Tom's constant need for attention was more than annoying. It was unprofessional, disruptive, and expensive. Every minute Christie spent managing Tom's behavior was a minute she couldn't spend actually running the business. He was a wrench thrown into the gears of a well-oiled machine, and Christie was the one who had to keep everything on track despite his daily chaos. You won't believe what happens next. All that daily frustration with Tom Smith was about to explode into a career-ending disaster that would haunt Christie forever. The incident that finally broke the camel's back involved Richard Rawlings' most prized possession, his personal Rolls-Royce. But listen to this. A fan with cystic fibrosis came to the garage, hoping to see the amazing cars and maybe get a picture with his heroes. Tom Smith and another mechanic, Jordan Butler, decided to let this sick fan get close to the Rolls-Royce for a photo opportunity. Sounds innocent enough, right? Wrong. When Richard discovered what happened, he went absolutely nuclear. Here's where it gets dark. Richard reportedly screamed at this sick fan, using terrible language to order him away from his precious car. Picture this scene. A person battling a life-threatening illness, just wanting a moment of joy, getting verbally destroyed by a millionaire protecting his toy. When a manager stepped in and confronted Tom and Jordan for allowing the situation, instead of showing remorse, they were completely insubordinate. They told the manager to chill out in the rudest way possible. A few hours later, after a heated confrontation, Richard fired them both on the spot. For Christie, this wasn't just another workplace drama. This was the ultimate betrayal of everything she stood for. Her job was protecting the Gas Monkey brand and its public image. An incident involving a sick fan and the owner's prized car was a public relations nightmare that made the garage look cruel and heartless. Tom's carelessness had created a mess that Christie would have to clean up for years. He showed complete disrespect for the business she worked so hard to build, crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. The chaos of Tom Smith was finally gone, but Christie had no idea a much bigger storm was brewing. Kaufman was known as the Bearded Wonder, and for good reason. He was the master mechanic, the quiet genius who could turn a pile of rust into automotive art. Richard Rawlings himself admitted that Aaron was the nucleus of Gas Monkey Garage. For years, he and Richard built an empire together, creating automotive magic that captivated millions. But here's the twist. Behind the scenes, the pressure of fame was slowly destroying the man who made it all possible. The garage had transformed from a workshop into a TV set, And the deadlines were no longer about building great cars. They were about making great television. Aaron grew tired of the constant cameras, the impossible schedules, and the sponsors breathing down his neck. He wanted to work on bigger, more complicated projects that took months, not the quick flips the TV show demanded. This creative difference became a massive problem that would shake Gas Monkey to its core. So in 2017, Aaron made a decision that stunned the car world. He walked away from Gas Monkey Garage completely. To the public, it looked like an artist choosing his craft over fame. Aaron said he left to save himself, to protect the part of him that still loved the smell of grease and the roar of an engine. But that's not all. For Christie Brimberry, his departure wasn't a noble act of artistic integrity. It was pure abandonment. It was a selfish decision that threw the entire operation into chaos and landed the mess squarely on her desk. The man who was the heart of every build, the genius who made the impossible possible, had just vanished when his team needed him most. What happened next will shock you. Suddenly, Gas Monkey Garage was operating without its lead mechanic, and the scramble to survive was immediate and desperate. Richard Rawlings admitted that Aaron's departure came completely out of left field and that moving forward without his talents would be a painstaking process. But here's the thing nobody talks about. That painstaking process became Christie's new nightmare reality. She was the one who had to manage the schedules, the parts orders, and the workflow of a garage that had just lost its most important member. Think about the chaos. Every project Aaron was working on suddenly had no leader. Every technique he knew was gone. Every relationship he had with suppliers and specialists vanished overnight. The garage was like a body that had just lost its brain, and Christie had to somehow keep it alive. They brought in a restoration expert named Jason Acker to oversee a couple of big projects. He was only supposed to be there temporarily, but after Aaron left, they begged him to stay on permanently as the new shop foreman. This showed just how unprepared they were for Aaron's exit. It created a massive logistical and morale crisis that Christie had to navigate while keeping the business running. But it gets worse. Aaron talked about personal and professional differences of opinion, hinting at bad blood behind the scenes. Whatever his reasons, the result was the same. He chose his own creative freedom over the stability of the team he helped build. While fans mourned the loss of their favorite mechanic, Christie had to manage the brutal reality of his absence. She had to keep the business running while its very foundation had been ripped out from under her. Aaron may have been a genius with cars, but in Christie's eyes, he was the man who abandoned his family when they needed him most. Dealing with the fallout from a star employee quitting was one thing, but soon Christie would have to watch another key player leave for reasons that felt like a slap in the face. Casey Matthew was the master painter, the quiet artist who gave Gas Monkey's creations their soul. His work was flawless and his calm attitude was a welcome relief in a shop filled with loud personalities. But the life of a reality TV star was not for him. By 2015, after years on the show, the constant attention had started to wear him down completely. Fans would line up outside the shop, and if he tried to go out for lunch, he would be mobbed by crowds. The pressure of filming and the lack of privacy got old fast. So Casey made a choice that would haunt Christie forever. He decided to step away from Fast and Loud to go back to what he loved most, running his own paint shop and spending more time with his family. He didn't leave because of drama or a big fight. He left for his own peace of mind, choosing a quiet life over the fame and fortune of television. On the surface, it was an admirable decision that many people respected. But here's where it gets interesting. For Christie Brimberry, the timing of his departure was a source of deep, unspoken frustration that cut her to the core. Casey left in 2015 because the pressure of the show was too much to handle. Just a few months later, in October 2016, Christie's world was turned upside down in the most devastating way possible. She was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. While Casey was enjoying the peace of his own shop, Christie was preparing for the fight of her life, facing a battle that would test every ounce of strength she had. You need to hear this part. While Casey Matthew was enjoying his peaceful escape from the chaos, Christie was facing the ultimate test of her strength and willpower. She had to undergo chemotherapy and then a life-altering surgery to remove a cancerous lymph node. The procedure was brutal and complicated. A nerve to her larynx was cut during the operation, leaving her with no voice for a long time. She had a tube in her throat and faced a recovery that could take up to 6 months. All of this was happening while she was still a mother to 6 children and a manager at one of the busiest and most chaotic garages on television. Think about that for a moment and let it sink in. Casey Matthew walked away from the job because the stress of being famous was too much for him to handle. At the exact same time, Christie was facing a life-threatening illness, the ultimate stress that could have killed her. Yet she had no choice but to keep going. She couldn't just quit like Casey did. She had a family to support and a business that depended on her every single day. But it gets even more incredible. She fought through the pain, the fear, and the complete silence, and eventually returned to the spotlight stronger than ever before. Her strength was absolutely incredible, but watching a key team member leave because the job was too hard must have been infuriating beyond words. Casey had the luxury of choosing a quieter life when things got tough. It was a choice Christie didn't have when cancer tried to destroy her. He got to escape the very chaos she had to endure while also battling for her life. His departure wasn't just an employee leaving for greener pastures. It was a stark reminder of the immense burden she carried, often completely alone. As if dealing with internal departures wasn't enough, a new threat emerged that would make Christie's blood boil. This time former employees weren't just leaving, they were starting a rival shop right under her nose, creating a public circus that threatened to destroy everything she'd built. Scott McMillan was a former mechanic at Gas Monkey Garage, but after he left, he didn't just disappear into obscurity like most ex-employees. Instead, he did something that felt like the ultimate betrayal. He teamed up with the 2 mechanics Richard had fired, Tom Smith and Jordan Butler, to start a new shop called Fired Up Garage. But here's where it gets crazier. This new shop became the focus of a spin-off show called Misfit Garage, and the entire point was to compete directly with Gas Monkey. The show was built on the idea that these misfits could build cars just as good as Richard's crew, proving that money and fancy equipment weren't everything. This created a public feud between the 2 garages that played out on national television. On TV, it looked like a bitter rivalry, with Richard often showing up to taunt his former employees in dramatic confrontations. For Christie Brimberry, this was an absolute nightmare that kept her up at night. A huge part of her job was managing the Gas Monkey brand and making sure it was seen as an elite, world-class operation. Now there was a TV show dedicated to a tacky, dramatic rivalry starring their own ex-employees. Scott McMillan wasn't just working somewhere else and minding his own business. He was actively participating in a public spectacle that was directly tied to Gas Monkey's reputation, and Christie had to watch it destroy everything she'd worked to build. Hold that thought, because it connects to something even crazier. The truth behind the scenes was even more frustrating than Christie could have imagined. The feud that was causing her daily headaches was mostly fake, manufactured drama designed to boost ratings and profits. Richard Rawlings was actually the landlord for the Fired Up Garage building, and he was also an executive producer on Misfit Garage. He was literally making money off the very rivalry that was causing Christie endless stress and sleepless nights. But the public didn't know that dirty secret. All they saw was the drama, the fights, and the chaos. Misfit Garage was just as dysfunctional as Gas Monkey, if not worse. The shop was constantly losing staff, and there was endless fighting and arguing between the cast members. In fact, Scott McMillan himself eventually quit Misfit Garage because he got sick of all the fussing and drama, the very same reasons many people left Gas Monkey in the first place. He left one circus only to join another, and then he left that one too when it got too messy. For Christie, Scott McMillan and the entire Misfit Garage crew were a constant source of frustration that felt like torture. They were a cheap imitation that diluted the brand she worked so hard to build and protect. They turned the respected craft of car building into petty reality TV drama that made everyone look unprofessional. Every time they created a new fake fight or a ridiculous storyline, it reflected back on Gas Monkey's reputation. Scott chose to be part of that embarrassing circus. He profited from manufactured drama while Christie had to manage the negative consequences and clean up the mess. He wasn't just an ex-employee who moved on. He was a traitor who helped create a public embarrassment she had to face every single day. Tom, Aaron, Casey, Scott. They were all sources of immense frustration for Christie, but as she managed each crisis, a bigger and more shocking truth became crystal clear. All these problems, all this chaos, all the drama and dysfunction pointed back to one single person. The biggest problem in the garage was not one of the monkeys. It was the ringmaster himself, Richard Rawlings. For years, Christie Brimberry worked tirelessly to bring order to the chaos of Gas Monkey Garage. She managed the wild mechanics, the impossible deadlines, and the constant pressure of a hit TV show. But here's the brutal truth that nobody talks about. Every fire she put out was started by the same person, her boss, Richard Rawlings. He was the architect of the success, but he was also the source of all the dysfunction and misery. The person who caused Christie the most grief was the very man who signed her paychecks. It was Richard's sometimes toxic personality that set the tone for the entire garage. He was the one who was never far from controversy, the one who had fallouts with his staff so often that talented people would find themselves run out of the garage. Former associates have called him an asshat who fosters a culture of entitlement and chaos. He created the very environment that Christie was hired to control. Her job as zookeeper wasn't just about managing the employees. It was about managing the unpredictable and demanding ringmaster at the center of it all. Think about the other names on this list and how they all connect back to Richard. Tom Smith was a chaotic employee, but it was Richard's explosive reaction during the Rolls-Royce incident that turned a simple mistake into a career-ending crisis. He was the one who allegedly screamed at a sick fan, creating the public relations nightmare that Christie had to deal with for years. And now we know why Richard Rawlings was Christie's biggest source of frustration. Aaron Kaufman, the brilliant mechanic, left because he was burned out by the relentless TV deadlines and the complete lack of creative freedom. But who set those impossible deadlines? Richard. Who prioritized the brand and the show over the art of the build. Richard. His hands-on management style and his obsession with expanding his empire created the high-pressure environment that drove his best mechanic away forever. Even the Misfit Garage rivalry that tortured Christie was Richard's own creation. He owned the building they worked in and was a producer on their show. He manufactured the drama with Scott McMillan and the others because it was good for business and his bank account. But it created a tacky, unprofessional image that undermined the elite brand Christie was desperately trying to protect. Every single problem traced back to him like a poison flowing through the entire organization. Christie's job was an impossible one that would have broken most people. She was hired to clean up the messes made by the very person who saw messes as a good business strategy. Her loyalty and professionalism were tested every single day in ways that would have destroyed weaker people. She had to survive not just the chaos of the garage, but the personality of the man who ruled it with an iron fist. While Richard was out making deals and becoming a star, Christie was back at the office holding everything together with her bare hands. She was the one ensuring that his empire didn't crumble from the inside out. The other 4 men on this list were just symptoms of the real disease. The true source of her frustration was Richard Rawlings himself, the man who created every problem she had to solve. While the world watched the flashy cars and the loud drama, Christie Brimberry was the silent force holding Gas Monkey Garage together, emerging as the true unsung hero who conquered it all. If you thought this video was tragic, then you must check out the video that's showing on your screen right now. There we talk about a bizarre story that will blow your mind.